I wrote down all of the families that we've helped earn scholarships in the college recruiting process and found the commonalities between them. And so if you do the same things they did and you exhibit a lot of the same traits, you are more likely to earn a scholarship as well. Now, let me be very clear. Only 7% of high school athletes actually play collegiate sports. So 93%, forget about scholarships for a second, 93% are never going to touch foot into college sports. Now, only 2%, instead of 7, only 2% are actually going to earn a scholarship. So it is unlikely that you will get a scholarship. Now, that being said, we actually see lots of athletes outside of the Division I level who get scholarships. Some of the ones that I'm about to show you in a second are worth over $100,000, and they're to D2 schools or NAIA schools, which is a pretty big deal. And so I want to show you exactly the traits and the behaviors of these families so that you can mimic them and hopefully increase the probability that you or your kid can earn a scholarship as well. So this family right here, $29,000 a year in scholarship money over 4 years, that's $116K. That is not to a Division I school. Or how about this family, $19,000, $14K athletic, $5K academic, over 4 years, that's $76,000. This is to a D2 school. This family, 10 offers and a total of $175,000 in combined scholarship offers. Or this family, $150,000 over 4 years. That's to a D2 school, right? So there are big scholarships outside of the Division I level, but you have to have the right behaviors and traits to get them. They're not going to hand you a $50,000 scholarship just for playing the game. There's no participation trophies in college recruiting. So the first trait that all of these families have is belief when things get hard. So the recruiting process is hard for everybody. Okay, there's like a handful of athletes where it's easy for them. The cream of the crop, the absolute best players in the country, they get the lion's share of interest and offers, right? And the process comes easy to them. Their kid is literally so good that they're going to get found no matter what, and everybody wants them. But that's like less than 1% of athletes, right? So the majority of families who get scholarships are ones who struggle in the process too. It's sort of like the price to pay, right? You got to pay the price of things being hard. And if you power through and you work through it, then you get rewarded on the other side. And so there will be moments in your recruiting process when your kid doubts their own abilities, when they're disheartened about the process. They send an email, they don't get a response, they get disheartened. Where you, as the parent, doubt your kid's abilities. You're like, man, I don't know if we're going to be able to make this happen. Maybe you go to a showcase or a camp and you see the level of talent that's there and you're like, I don't know if my kid stacks up, right? There might be moments of doubt, but one thing that is true across every family that we've worked with who's gotten a scholarship is that they have belief when things get hard, right? They don't necessarily have this unwavering belief all the time where they're 100% certain this is always going to work. It's not that, right? They have moments of doubt. That's okay. That's normal. The process is very hard, but they don't let that stop them from continuing to put in the work to make this happen. And so even when there's no momentum, they continue to believe and push through. And so it's okay and it's normal to have moments of doubt, but you can't let that stop you from continuing to do the things that are actually going to put your kid on college coaches' radars and eventually earn you those scholarships. They always have belief when things get hard. They don't have unreasonable expectations that the process is going to be super easy. It's not going to be easy, and that's okay. Just accept that and say, you know what? I know that that's true, but it doesn't mean that I can't get my kid a scholarship or I can't get my kid to play at the next level, because you can, even when things are hard. The second trait, all of these scholarship families contacted a lot of schools. And I bring this up because this is one of the things that I get a lot of pushback on. Is I usually recommend contacting a whole bunch of schools, right? Usually a minimum of 100. And a lot of families look at me and go, you're crazy. You know, they have a panic attack. They say, we're not interested in 100 schools. They didn't even know 100 schools existed, right? They say things like that. But the reality is that you're not going to get the exposure that you need if you only contact 20 to 30 schools, especially if your kid is not a top level D1 player. You have to grind through it, and you have to get as many coaches as humanly possible to know who your kid is. And so nearly all of our scholarship families have contacted at least 100 schools. And most of those who get scholarships worth over $100,000, which is not that many, right? That's a lot of scholarship money. There's not that many who are in that boat, but those families, they typically contact at least 250, right? They spread this incredibly wide net. And so you have this group of parents who doesn't want to contact 100 schools because they're not interested in 100 schools, right? And so they struggle to get any interest. And then you have families who take, the humble route and they say, you know what, we're just going to go contact a whole bunch of schools and see what happens. And ironically, the ones with humility, they are the ones who get the largest scholarships or even just scholarships at all. And so this just makes logical sense. The families who get exposure, the families who have more college coaches who know who their kid exists, they are the ones who get scholarships. That just makes logical sense. You don't really have a great argument to not contact more schools. Besides, it takes a lot of work. Welcome to the recruiting process. We're talking about $20,000, $50,000, $100,000. There was one family I showed you, $150,000. That is an annual salary. Of course, it's going to take a lot of work, but it's also worth it. Not only is that a lot of money, but you're also getting your kid to an awesome school. They continue their education. They make lifelong friends. There's so many reasons to put in that work. The third thing they do is they make adjustments. So there's a lot of families who will send an email to a bunch of coaches and then they don't get a response. And then they go, oh, all right, well, we'll just keep going. And then they continue to do the same thing over and over again, but it hasn't proven to work. So these scholarship families, when they hit a wall, they try something different. They do a different email script. They do different schools or different levels of schools. If they only contacted D1 and D2, maybe in a second or third campaign, they contact D3, NAI, junior colleges, right? They make a new video or they have a new content type that they post on social media, a new DM script, maybe some other recruiting strategy that they're using to get on college coaches' radars. But they view the recruiting process as a puzzle to solve. They don't expect that when they open the puzzle box up and they dump all the pieces out, that instantly all of those pieces are just going to magically put themselves together. They go, no, this is going to take time. And we're going to have to figure out how all of these pieces move together. And they're willing to look on a long enough time horizon to let that happen. They don't expect this to come together in 2 weeks or 3 months. They expect it to come together over 12 months. And that's a much more reasonable timeline. And they just continually make adjustment after adjustment until they accomplish their goal. And they know that when they find the right pieces, they're going to succeed. And that goes back to the first thing we talked about, which is belief. Even when things are hard, they believe that they can make it happen. The fourth trait is that they get more video. This is similar to when I said they contact more schools. They also get more video. So scholarship families tend to have more video than the average family. And we've done the analysis on this, and it's actually more than twice as much. It's not a little bit more, it's a lot more video. They understand the importance of having a large quantity of proof of talent. These college coaches are trying to determine out of hundreds of thousands or even millions of players, who are the few that are actually going to help me win a championship? And those college coaches have to get it right, because if they recruit a bad class, guess what happens? They get fired. And what happens if they get fired? They can't put food on the table for their family. That's a problem. So how well they recruit is a direct correlation to whether they can provide for their family or not. So you have to understand the level of confidence that they need to have to give a kid a scholarship. And the families who tend to get that money usually take this very seriously. And they give coaches so much proof so that these college coaches have no doubt that their kid is the perfect fit for their team. And this happens even though capturing video is a pain in the butt. They do it anyway. No parent, just give you some solace here, because if you're a parent, you're like, oh, I hate getting video at games. I'm not good with the technology. I don't like having to go up in front of all the other parents. And then there's usually a fence in the way and all these different reasons why it stinks to get video, right? And they just want to watch their kid. They don't want to have to take video. They just want to enjoy watching them play. Scholarship families don't make those excuses. They just don't. And I'm not even saying that those things aren't reasonable. They're totally reasonable. But you know what's unreasonable is to not do those things and expect to get a big fat scholarship worth a lot of money. Like that, getting a scholarship, 2% of players get scholarships, right? It'd be unreasonable for you to think that you're going to get a scholarship So that also means that you have to do unreasonable things to make that happen. You have to send an unreasonable amount of emails. You have to make an unreasonable amount of videos. You have to do an unreasonable amount of things. So scholarship families have more video, specifically twice as much as everybody else. The fifth trait, consistent actions. So they put the effort in on a weekly basis, regardless of results, right? So it doesn't matter whether they're getting a whole bunch of interest or no interest at all. They continually, week in and week out, show up and do the things that they know will end up giving them the best opportunity to get roster spots and scholarships. There was a family that we were working with a little while ago, and we sent an email campaign out for them, and it didn't do well. The family didn't get very much interest from that first email campaign. Now, I would just sort of shake this off and be like, all right, so what? Time to send the second campaign. Let's contact some different schools. Maybe we switch up the script. Maybe we switch up the video. Maybe we try it on a different platform. Instead of email, we try Twitter. Like, I would just say, okay, this is just part of the process. But this family got so disheartened by that they just completely stopped responding. We tried to reach out to them multiple times. They completely stopped. We never heard from them for 6 months. And then 6 months later, they come back and they're like, okay, we're going to try again. We're going to try and do this again, right? Which I'm glad that they got up off the mat to continue the fight. What's the problem? They wasted 6 months. And now it's even harder than it was before. Families who get scholarships don't do that. Even when things get hard, even when they're not getting results, they still continue to show up. $50,000 scholarships are not going to fall into your lap. You have to work for them. And so these families, they're always looking for ways to give their kid an edge, right? They're like, man, could we go to a different, private instructor? Could we add another lesson a week? Can we get more reps before practice or after practice? How can we get more evidence? How can we make that evidence more substantial? How do we get more exposure, right? How do we go to more recruiting events, or how do we pick better recruiting events so that we're not wasting our time and money on a bunch of these things? They give their kid encouragement. Even when their kid gets discouraged, they say, you know what? Pick your head up. This is part of the game. Rejection's part of the game. This is the price you have to pay to accomplish the dream that you want, right? And the kids pick their head up, and as a family unit, they continue to row in the same direction and they push on toward the goal. And that's what scholarship families do. The sixth thing is that they're constantly learning. So they never assume that they know everything or they know what's best, right? They are obsessed with learning. They ask other families what's working for them. They're like, maybe this family has something. Maybe this family has something. Maybe this family has something. And then what they do is they filter that information to figure out what's BS and what's actually good. Because there are families who are getting results in the process who would give them advice, but just because somebody is getting results in the process doesn't mean that they know how they're doing it or that they can give you good advice, right? It might still be bad advice. They might just be getting lucky. And so these families who get scholarships, they filter that data and they say, wait, this doesn't line up with what I'm learning, but this other piece of advice from another family, that lines up. And so not only do they ask everyone around them, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? They're learning from everyone around them. Not only that, but they filter the data to know what's good information and what's bad information. They find people who have a proven system and pay them. They're not afraid to spend money, even if it's a few $1,000s or something like that, because they know that they could end up getting a scholarship worth $50,000. What's a few $1,000s in light of $50,000? They don't care. They understand that. They're like, I just need the cheat code. I need the straight path. I don't want to waste my time, right? And so they're like, yeah, who has the answers? And they're not afraid to pay for that. Trial and error. They continually try something. Oh, it doesn't work. Let's try this. Doesn't work. Let's try this. And they keep going. They use Google. They use social media. Again, using the data filtration to figure out what's good advice and what's bad advice. But these families don't assume that they know the answers. They admit their weaknesses and then they get help. And one of the most dangerous things is assuming that because you've gone to a lot of recruiting events, or because you've had a kid go through the process before, or because you have a coach that you really trust who's in your corner, that you know a lot about the recruiting process. And that's very dangerous, because it leads you falsely for a long period of time. And then eventually when you do learn that you don't know everything, you've now lost a lot of time and the process gets harder. And so families who get scholarships, they're constantly learning. And so this is the last trait, trait 7. This is the last trait, and it's the most important trait, okay? There's no trait in this list that is more important than this, because the reality is as soon as you give up, your process is over. I want you to say this in your head. I cannot lose if I do not quit. I cannot lose if I do not quit. Scholarship families are relentless. Even when their kid is struggling through the process, not getting interest, they're putting in the work without seeing results. They're going to lessons, they're, sending emails, they're going to showcases, and they're not getting interest yet. Guess what? They don't stop. They don't take long breaks. They understand that the recruiting process is very different now than it used to be, and they admit that it's harder. We're not trying to say that the recruiting process is super easy. It's not. And so it's okay to admit that, but not accept defeat. I cannot lose if I do not quit. That's what the line is. I cannot lose if I do not quit. Yes, the process is harder now than it's ever been. True. Yes, it's unreasonable that your kid could earn a scholarship based on statistics. Sure, but lots of families do. With kids who are not top-level D1 talent, why couldn't that be you? You should be exhibiting all of these same traits that these athletes did because it worked for them and their families. And so, if you're in the recruiting process, if you're the parent of a high school athlete, and you want help navigating the process, like those other families did that I showed you, then you can click the link in the description below to learn more about joining our program. We specifically work with parents. And so there will be a form that you fill out, and we'll walk you through exactly how we are helping families navigate through this tumultuous process, hard process. Big fancy word there. Anyway, hopefully this was helpful for you. If you want to join the program, you can click the link in the description. We'll chat with you about that. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.